Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to our lessons on reconstructing a biblical worldview. This is lesson 2, and the idea is going to be 12 points that show Christianity is true. We're going to jump into that in just a moment, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page. Don't forget, if you have not yet listened to lesson 1, you want to go back and listen to that one because it really sets the groundwork for what we are wanting to do. We define phrases like deconstructing, which is really dealing with breaking down our Christian worldview, but then reconstructing, and that is building it back up again based on the truth of God's word and just logical flow of how things work. And it's important to also deal with the different kinds of doubts that we have in our life and making sure we're all on the same page when it comes to what it is that we're wanting to do. And so what today's lesson is all about is going to be the first of a 2-part session on the 12 points that prove Christianity is true. And it comes from a book called that same thing, 12 Points That Prove Christianity is True, by Dr. Norman Geisler, kind of a mentor from afar of mine. And what he does is he starts with really just the reality of truth. And by the end of the 12, it is going to be a Christian worldview. And there are really a lot of reasons for doing this. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. But let's make sure we first remember what we're doing. The goal of this series is to realize that everyone who follows God will most likely go through a season of doubt and deconstruction. The goal of these sessions is to help build a solid biblical worldview that can withstand the pressures of life and the overwhelming amount of information that we occur on a daily basis. The goal of the 12 points that show Christianity is true for us is to prove a logical framework for the plausibility, the believability of Christianity. And we want to remember our framework. And our framework is that we will follow the truth wherever it leads, and that our job is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond no doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt. And here's the thought process, is 2 things will happen with this. Number 1 is we want to make sure that we can get all the way down to the studs, okay? Like if somewhere were to have burned a house down and all that's left is the foundation, you go, okay, we're good. Because we clear away all the rubble and we will rebuild a house on that foundation. And so that's what we're doing, is if you have been in a place where you have been just burnt down to the ground as far as your belief, let's start there and let's build from there. The next great thing is, I'll go ahead and tell you, as you are rebuilding your faith, is you're going to come in contact with people who want to challenge you. And I will tell you, as a Christian, what I have learned to do is I will begin to ask questions to figure out where in these 12 points are we. Because we may need to start all the way at the beginning with just defining truth. Or we may be already almost at the very end, and we need to figure out where that is. And so I'm curious. I want you to let me know in the comments below. I would like to know, where are you on this journey? And are you at already number 12? You're good? You just need some facts? Or are you starting from the beginning? And so let's do that. Let's start from the beginning. This lesson will be the first 6 of these 12 points. Here's the first one, and that is this: truth about reality is knowable. Truth about reality is knowable. Now, if truth were unknowable, the statement that truth is unknowable would be self-defeating. So in other words, truth must be knowable because we even know what that even is. So just think logically. If someone were to tell you that all truth is relative, then your first question would be, well, is that statement true? Because if that's true, then there is at least one truth that is knowable. And if you don't believe that, then just keep listening with us, because I think we're going to prove it. Here's the next one. Daily life requires assuming that some truth is knowable, such as science, justice, and relationships. Logic depends on objective truths that apply to everyone. Let me give you an example. It is objectively true that gravity exists. If you ever come in contact with someone that says all truth is relative, in other words, it just really matters what you believe about truth, well, then tell them to go jump off of a small building. What I mean by that is one that they won't die from, okay? We don't want this object lesson to cost them anything, but maybe just jump off a ledge. And before that, you just say, well, the truth is that I can fly, and then see how that goes. Well, the reality is they will discover that there are actually 2 different kinds of truth, and that is, there is objective truth and then there is subjective truth. Objective truth is observable. It is a brute force fact that cares nothing about what we think about it. It just is true. But then you have subjective truths, which is how we relate to that. So once again, let me give you an example of gravity. Gravity is an objective truth. That means it doesn't matter how you feel about it. You can want to fly all you want to, but flapping your wings, flapping your hands is not going to help you to fly. That is just an objective truth. Now, subjective truth is how we relate to it. So I can fly if I get in an airplane. It doesn't change the fact that I myself cannot fly, but I can change the parameters so that I can fly under certain conditions. So it's subjective truth. It is subject to change, but it doesn't change the fact that by myself I cannot fly. Let's go ahead and get controversial and say, therefore, there are only two genders. There are male and female. Now, what I can do is I can say I'm a different sexual orientation, but it doesn't change the fact that biologically I still am. I can even go through a sex change, but I cannot change my chromosomal makeup. I am still either male or female. So truth is knowable. If someone ever says you can't know truth, we'll say, is that statement true? If that statement is true, that means we can know it, which means it is knowable. And the laws of non-contradiction and identity and excluded middle apply. So the very base level is that it is possible to know if something is true or false. The second point that proves Christianity is true, and you can tell we're slowly building, is that if we can know truth, the opposite of true is false. Opposite of true is false. A statement and its opposite cannot be true at the same time. This is the law of non-contradiction. Therefore, all communication assumes that some statements are false. Without truth and falsehood, moral, scientific, and legal judgments collapse. Religious claims cannot all be true if they contradict each other. That means all roads do not lead to God. Have you ever heard someone say, just believe, and whatever you believe, it'll all end up okay at the end of the day? That can't be true. The reason why is, for instance, let's say the three major religions in the world, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Christianity says Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven. Judaism doesn't believe in Jesus. Islam says that Jesus was a prophet, but he wasn't the Son of God, and the only way is to submit to Allah. Those three things are contradictory. Therefore, all roads cannot, because remember, the opposite of true is false, and truth is knowable. Therefore, they all can't lead that way. But truth is possible, and the opposite of truth is false. So there is a right way and a wrong way to believe and get to God. So if that's true, then the next statement makes a real big difference, and that is, it is true that the theistic God exists. There are three different ways, mainly, to believe about God: atheism, agnosticism, and theism. Now, there's another one called deism. We'll get to that in just a moment. A lot of isms, right? Atheism means a lack of belief in God. Now, some of your more controversial ones would say it is a lack of belief, but it really is saying they believe God doesn't exist, right? The second one is agnosticism, which says, I don't know, no one can know if God exists. And then you have the third one, and that is theism, which is that they believe that God exists. Now you have one that's called deism, which is they believe God exists, but he is not personally involved in creation, but a theistic God believes based on the evidence. Let's cover some of those. Some of those would be that the universe began to exist, therefore it has a cause beyond itself. Think about for a moment. Atheists say there was no beginning to the universe. Well, can you prove that at all? We can actually prove there was a beginning to the universe because of the Big Bang Theory, that everything is going outward from a central point. And then, so we know that something happened that started all of this. But if you say it always existed, well, the burden of proof now becomes on you. Here's the next one, that the cause must be, if the world began, or the universe began, it must be timeless, powerful, and immaterial. That is the definition of God. Moral values require a moral lawgiver beyond humanity. Think about this. Across all cultures that we've ever talked to, ever discovered, everything at all, there are a few moral things that exist always. One of them is, among every culture, it is always important that they don't kill one another. Like that is considered to be the capital crime among all cultures we've ever discovered. Another one is that you take care of the elderly. For the most part, that has been one that's always been there. Another one is to not kill innocent. Where did these come from? Why is this automatically there? That should not be the case. If atheism is true, why would it matter? It's the survival of the fittest, but yet there's something inside the human heart. Where did that come from? Probably from the one who created us. How about this one? The universe follows intelligent design, fine-tuning, information in DNA. Did you know that they have recently made some discoveries with the human eyeball that completely baffle anyone who doesn't believe in God? Because they say that if God is not true, then all of this is an accident, very, very lucky accident, and evolution is the only way that things could be, and that evolution is the slow process of slowly developing into what we are now. Well, first of all, you don't have all the middle that's there. Like if we're slowly developing, where's all the other stages at? We don't know where those are, but they are saying that the human eye, it is impossible for it to slowly develop the way it did to get what we have now. That it is impossible because of the way it is made, that all of these things would have had to come together at the same time. Well, explain that one if you don't believe that God created all of it. How about the intelligent design of the universe? The universe is so finely tuned by the laws of mathematics that if one thing were out of place, none of this could exist. Did you realize that the earth is on an axis in such a way that if it was 1 to 2 degrees off, either way, we would either burn or freeze to death? Like everything is so perfectly made, you either have to believe that this is the luckiest thing that's ever happened, and then if you believe in aliens, which is a whole other topic, that also is extremely lucky elsewhere, that this is ridiculously lucky, or God made it. Can I be honest with you? I don't have enough faith to believe all that other stuff. Like it's easier for me to believe in God than to believe all of this is a happy accident. And then here's one more. Human reason, freedom, and consciousness are the best explanations of a personal creator. So here's the first one. Truth is knowable. And then therefore, number 2, if truth is knowable, then also falsehood is knowable. Number 3, we can tell by the observable universe that it is beyond a reasonable doubt, it is more likely than not that a theistic God exists. Then if that's the case, and here's point 4, if God exists, then miracles are possible. And that's going to be important for what we do later. Here's some facts for you. If God created the universe, he can intervene in it whenever he so pleases. Miracles are not violations of natural law, but acts of the one who made them. You cannot rule out miracles before looking at evidence for them. A theistic worldview makes miracles logically consistent, and the historical evidence for miracles depends on investigation, not assumption. There are atheists who say, well, God can't be real because miracles are impossible. To which the answer to that would be, well, if God exists, then he has the ability to interrupt the natural law he created. And that's important because miracles are the way God shows us that he is real. So for the most part, God would leave natural law exactly the way it is. He made it. He made it good. That's how everything functions. That's how everything stays in organization. However, he has the ability to intervene with natural law in order to show his presence. That's what miracles are. So let's review. Truth is knowable. Since truth is knowable, number 2, falsehood is knowable. Therefore, number 3, a theistic God exists. And you can look at space. You can look at the way the human body is made. You can look at the fine-tuning of the universe. The bigger the telescopes and the smaller the microscopes, the more we see. None of this is random. We can prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that it is at least plausible that a theistic God exists. Therefore, if a theistic God exists, then miracles are possible. Therefore, number 5, miracles then can be used to confirm a message from God. This is important because what some people believe is they believe what we said earlier, deism. Deism is that, sure, at the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and he spun it into existence. And now he is just sitting back and he is just watching us. It's like we're a zoo, and he has nothing to do with it. It all just happens. Well, if that were the case, then there would never be a miracle because God would not interfere with what's going on. However, if God were to communicate, he would use miracles to show us that what he is saying is true. He would step into the natural order to show he is doing something different. This is important because true miracles point beyond themselves to God's authority. Miracles validate prophets and apostles in Scripture, and miracles are God's signature of his divine message. That also means false miracles exist, but they can be tested and by truth and context. Jesus appealed to his miracles as evidence for his identity. So can you see where we're going? Truth is knowable. That means falsehood is knowable. A theistic God exists. Therefore, he will use miracles, and miracles can point to the message of God. And here's the last one for today, and that is important because the New Testament is historically reliable, and that's important because of the next step. But the New Testament is historically reliable, and we know this. And by the way, we're going to have an entire lesson on this coming up. But we know this because the New Testament was written early. It's based on eyewitness testimony, verified by archaeology, supported by the 1,000 manuscripts, and contains undesigned coincidences, that embarrassing details, which are the mark of authenticity. In other words, there are things that in there that only something that was divinely inspired would, because otherwise it wouldn't have been put in there, because they're just flat out embarrassing. There's a part where a guy runs off naked because he's afraid. We wouldn't have put that in there. You know what I mean? So it is absolutely amazing. And that's important because we look to God's word to see where those miracles are. And so let's review. We are building a 12-point fact base that shows Christianity is true. Therefore, no matter whether you have been on your way down in deconstruction or you're on your way up in reconstruction, you can use this to build that solid biblical framework. And that is this. Number one, truth is knowable. Number two, that means that it is possible then to discern the difference between true and false. Number three, it is provable beyond a reasonable doubt that a theistic God exists. And once again, look to moral law. Look to the fine-tuning of the universe. Look to the cosmological argument. There are so many different things you can look at that you go, you know what? I have no idea what else could be true. Therefore, by itself, maybe not, but as we're building it, it's building the case. And then number four, we talked about the idea that if God does exist, then miracles must be possible. Number five, if miracles are possible, then God can use miracles to prove that he is active and involved in the world. And then, as we hold that there, we also then say the New Testament documents are historically reliable. That's going to be important because then the miracles in the Bible are going to be true. So, and we can prove that it's true. We have a whole lesson on that. So here's your homework before the next one, and that is this. Have you thought about the importance of logic when it comes to believing a worldview? Like, we believe Jesus died on the cross and all that is wonderful. Of course it is, and it's powerful and it's amazing. But have you ever thought about the fact that there's a theological framework that you can slowly prove logically that God exists? Here's the second one. Have you struggled with faith in the past because it was based on feelings and not reality? Have you done that? Can I tell you, as just the way I made up, I have. Like, I had a hard time believing that Christianity was true for a while because I'm just not an overly emotional guy. And I would see people cry and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, well, I don't really feel like crying. So am I doing this wrong? Only to realize that emotion is great, but we believe God based on facts, not just emotion. And here's one more. Have you so far been able to believe beyond a reasonable doubt? One of them that may stick with you before we end is the one about the theistic God. And for some of you, you may be like, well, actually, that's my problem. I have no problem believing truth. I just don't believe you can logically prove that theism is true. Well, let me encourage you to go look at the fine-tuning argument. I want you to look at the cosmological argument. And one that a mentor of mine from afar, C.S. Lewis, is the moral argument. Now, here's what, and I can't spell argument. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at these. There's also one called the Kalam cosmological argument. And look at these and look at them looking for the truth. Is it logically possible that everything you see is completely random? Like, the universe has always existed, and then somehow or another it all just kind of slowly formed this way? Well, who did that? Well, what would have to be, if it would have to be something that is timeless, spaceless, outside of time and space, of a substance not of ours, and is able to control all that. Well, isn't that the definition of God? That's the way that would happen. And so, is it easier to believe that everything here is just one extremely lucky chance? Or is it easier to believe that there is a theistic God who created all of this? I'll let you decide. Next time, we will cover the other points, and we're going to get a little closer to understanding the 12 points that prove Christianity is true. I'll see you then.
Oh.